Hello there. A number of islands in the South Pacific have been hit by several tsunamis created by a powerful earthquake deep in the ocean. Reports say people were killed in American Samoa and more died in the separate nation of Samoa. The exact death toll remains unconfirmed, but according to Samoa's Disaster Management Office, as many as 100 people may have died and many more may have been injured. There are reports of 13-foot-high waves hitting the islands. Well, let's get the very latest now from our correspondent, Phil Mercer, who's in Sydney. What is the latest you can tell us, Phil? Because we're hearing from one wire copy that perhaps more than 100 people have been killed.
Well, as the rescue effort continues, the worse the situation is looking. Dozens of people are reported dead. Islanders say that they felt a severe jolt and tremors that lasted for several minutes before Samoa and American Samoa were bashed by a series of large waves.
Tsunamis.
There has been widespread damage,
South
severe loss
Pacific
of life,
tsunamis.
and we understand that bodies may have been buried under sand as well, and reports too that entire villages have been flattened, and at the moment precise information is very hard to come by because the authorities in Samoa and neighbouring American Samoa are trying desperately, they're struggling really to build a clear picture of the scale of this disaster.
We're looking at some stills at the moment of some of the devastation caused. We've been talking about two islands in particular, Samoa and American Samoa. Have you got any details on any of the other islands in the South Pacific that may have been devastated too?
Well, earlier there was a tsunami alert issued for other parts of the South Pacific, including Fiji, Tonga and New Zealand. That warning has been cancelled, but Japan has also issued a tsunami warning along its eastern coast following the earthquake near the Samoan group of islands. Now, Samoa and American Samoa are home to about 250,000 people. They lie halfway between New Zealand and Hawaii. They comprise the independent nation of Samoa and American Samoa, which is a U.S. territory, and that is really where the devastation is focused. Rescue workers face an immense task reaching all of the affected areas. They've been confronted by extensive damage to property, a very serious loss of life we've been discussing, overturned cars, for example, stuck in mud and landslides, and what's making their job even more hazardous and difficult, roads have been cut and communications disrupted.
Okay, that's Phil Mercer live in Sydney for us. For now, thank you very much indeed. Well, the Honorary British Consul in Samoa, Dr. Stephen Rogers, spoke to me a little bit earlier. He says there have been 20 confirmed casualties and a number of hospital admissions from injuries.
Well, I think we have no really firm basis to say what numbers of casualties we've got. The only confirm that we've had is at least 20 people, 20 bodies have been recovered from the south coast where the tsunami hit. There's quite a number of small beach resorts with small houses on the beach, and two bigger resorts that have been damaged by the tsunami. And there have certainly been casualties. I visited both the main hospitals in Bigfoot, and there have been a number of admissions with injuries, but today no people from the UK or British citizens have been admitted.
Just give us a sense of what these coastal resorts are like. Are they tourist resorts or where they contain homes?
Yes, no, they're both. The small, quite a number of small villages with residents on the south coast where there's been obviously damage and people have been injured and some loss of life. And then all along that south and west coast, there are streams of small beach houses which are left for tourists. And I think many of those have been washed away or damaged quite extensively. On the other side of the island and in the capital, although we felt this morning a very, very big earthquake, there hasn't been an awful lot. In fact, I've not actually seen any structural damage, although many of the houses were badly shaken and there was some internal moving of things. But we haven't seen any major buildings collapsing. And around lunchtime, the tsunami warning was cancelled, and people are moving around on the roads in the main city and around on the island. People are not going over to the south coast unless they have reason to do so, because
Bigfoot,
obviously the emergency services are
the return of of Bigfoot.
Well, I was just about to ask, what have the emergency services been doing? How have they reacted? And have the hospitals been ready to cope?
Well, when I visited the hospitals in the country, at that time there were a number of people who had been admitted from one of the beach resorts on the south coast. I don't know further information from you of what's happening actually on the south coast. One piece of anecdotal information that was happening at the hospital is one of the fire engines that was going to the rescue of people actually overturned, and so there were injuries of the firefighters. And some of the roads on the south coast have been washed away, and so it's quite difficult in some places to actually travel along the south coast. But our sense of that is I really have no first-hand knowledge from that, and we're just hearing on the local news what is actually happening on the south coast.
Tsunamis.
Okay, well that was Dr. Stephen Rogers.
That was
from the British Consulate.
Stephen
Samoa.
Brahmin
Well,
21.
I understand that we can now speak to
Oh look, there's more.
who is in one of the affected areas. Thank you very much indeed for your time. What can you tell us at the moment about what you're seeing and experiencing?
Well, I'm speaking to you not from the affected area, but I'm speaking to you from the capital where all the information are now being gathered of what has happened this morning as the outcome of the tsunami and the earthquake. What I can tell you right now, the National Disaster Committee will be meeting in an hour's time, and then we people in the media will be able to get some information of what has been damaged, and also the number of injured people, and also the deaths.
What happened when the alarm was raised after the earthquake? Are you aware of whether people were taken to higher ground? Were official warnings in place quickly enough?
I think the tsunami warning was issued just minutes after the major earthquake. Before a couple of few aftershocks after the main earthquake. But the tsunami warning was issued straight away, and people living in town, especially in those low-lying areas around the coastal of Apia area, were quickly to move up to the highlands. Students in schools around the capital were all moved to the highlands and evacuated from the school buildings, as well as all government employees and the private sector workers. They were all evacuated immediately up to the high grounds.
Are Samoan people, and indeed American Samoan people, prepared for this kind of thing? Do they do drills, for example, of potential tsunami warnings?
Yes, last year and the year before we had two major tsunami drills where most people living in town responded. Unfortunately, there were reported during those drills that people living in the rural areas on this island of Upolu and the main island of Savai'i, which is the bigger one, did not respond. But now it was the tsunami in Rio. Now we found out that people living in the rural area and this part of the southern coast of Upolu Island were affected. It's too bad for them, they didn't really have time to prepare themselves to move to the higher lands because the tsunami hit them, which resulted in some injured, damages to houses, and some loss of lives.
Now, I may not have mentioned this a little earlier, but I understand you work for Radio Polynesia in Samoa. Now, I understand your radio station's been guiding people on what to do and where to go. What have you been telling people?
Well, people are now on the air been telling people at the time after the earthquake to move to the higher grounds. And people living in town, especially around the country as well, from the result of those two drills in the last couple of years, they knew now it's a real thing, and they started to move.